Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Very nice to see you this absolutely splendid morning. All right, so as Brother Bill said, we're going to try and slay some giants this morning together. We mentioned yesterday, didn't we, that, giants were the subject of childhood fear. And then we grow up and we pack them away and we don't worry about those mythical creatures so much anymore. Except, of course, that, in the time of the people of Israel, there were giants, real giants that roamed the land. And we looked at how many of the faithful encountered giants at various points in the story of those early years of the children of Israel in the land. In fact, the first mention of giants in the Bible is back in Genesis chapter 6, verse 4. So let's, if you wouldn't mind, go there for a moment. And we've got a few passages we want to turn up this morning, so you might want to limber up those page-turning fingers of yours, ready so that we can swiftly move and navigate between the passages we want to go to this morning. So Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, the chapter in which the flood will commence, we read that there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. When the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children unto them, and the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Giants. And the Hebrew word here is actually the word Nephilim. This Hebrew word comes from a root which means to fall. But the word is so ancient, it's so old, its origins so lost in the dusty mists of time that no one knows whether the word was actually intended to indicate terrifying warriors who felled all who came before them, or they themselves were the fallen ones, apostates, fallen away from the truth and from the family of God. Whatever they were, they had something to do with falling. And these Nephilim here are described as the children of marriages between the family of Seth, known as the sons of God, and the spawn of Cain, the daughters of men. And it appears that either way we read this word, whether we read it as they were those who felled others, or whether we read it as they were the fallen, it still holds truth and meaning for these famous mighty men. The Hebrew is the Ha-Gibrim. The famous mighty ones were clearly key contributors to God's assessment of the earth in verse 5, when it says that God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Violent, apostate, fallen fellas of their fellow men. And this word Nephilim only shows up again one more time in the whole Bible, just once. But its use gives us a much clearer picture of what made these Nephilim, the Ha-Gibrim, these fallen, mighty, champion giants, what made them significant. And it's in the reading that Brother Bob read so well for us this morning in Numbers chapter 13. So let's go back there. Numbers 13. And verse 33, and we saw there the giants. There's our word, Nephilim. The only other occurrence. We saw there the giants, the sons of Anak, which came of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. And here we're told that in Hebron, the 12 spies saw Nephilim, the sons of one Anak, which were descendants of the Nephilim. Now, whatever the spies saw in Hebron, they clearly could not have seen the genetic descendants of the Nephilim of Noah's time. For all of them died in the flood. And yet, there was something about these inhabitants of Hebron, observed by the spies from a safe distance outside Hebron's walls. There was something there that evoked to them those old stories, those ancient memories of the Nephilim that had brought the catastrophe to the world. What detail was it that the 10 spies noted about those distant figures striding around Hebron's fortifications that so filled them with terror? Well, what did they see that horrified them? Well, they actually say it themselves, don't they? They say, verse 33, we were as grasshoppers are to a man. So we felt before them. We felt like we were grasshoppers before them, and so they must have looked on us as tiny before them. The immense size of these 3 warriors striding about these walls was what horrified them, and presumably it was obvious even from a distance that these warriors were incredibly large, perhaps because they were able to compare them with the size of other normal human-sized warriors on those same walls together with the giants. Perhaps they were able to compare their own height or the height of others with the giants they saw on Hebron's battlements. But that's not all they say. They say they were the sons of Anak. How did they know from a distance that these 3 belonged to that tribe without talking to them, without seeing them up close? They didn't walk up to Hebron and knock on the door and say, "Excuse me, we just happened to see some gentlemen on your walls. We wonder who they might be related to. Perhaps we knew their uncle." That's not what happened, was it? No, it was because the people of Anak were famous. They were famous even to a slave nation who had been locked away in Egypt for 400 years. And after that, in the wilderness, isolated for 40 years, even still, everybody knew about Anak. It was proverbial. Who can stand before the children of Anak, a people great and tall? And so when you saw a giant, instinctively you knew, oh, Anak, we've heard stories about them. Clearly in the minds of the spies, Noah's Nephilim had been giants. And these terrifying figures on Hebron's battlements, they were giants too. And so they drew a natural connection. Noah's Nephilim were giants. These men are giants. They too must be Nephilim. Moses, in writing Genesis, clearly saw a connection as well. For even though all of the Nephilim of old had died in the flood, he noted back there in Genesis, where we were a few minutes ago, that there would be Nephilim again. When he says, and also after that. You see that? The Nephilim were in the earth in those days, and also after this. And so he saw that connection. He noted there would be Nephilim again, giant heroes of apostate violence after the flood. I think there's also another connection between the Nephilim of Noah's time and the giants of Moses' time. You see, there's another word that is used to describe these giants, and we find it in Deuteronomy chapter 2, if you'd be so kind to follow me there. Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 10. And here, God is talking to Moses about the nations that they would encounter on their movement from the wilderness into the land. And he says, the Emims dwelt therein in times past, a people great and many, and tall as the Anakims, which were also accounted giants as the Anakims. But the Moabites called them Emims. The Horims also dwelt in Seir beforetime, but the children of Israel succeeded them when they destroyed them from before them and dwelt in their stead, as Israel did unto the land of his possession, which Yahweh gave unto them. So what we're told here is that this people, the Emims, were accounted giants like the Anakims, the sons of Anak, because they were great and tall. Except that the word here, where it says, verse 11, that they were accounted giants, doesn't mean giants. Almost every other version, and many of you may have versions that say this, it uses the word Rephaim. Like the Anakims, they were accounted as Rephaim. Now, Rephaim comes from a word that means to drop down. To drop down as dead. There's a children's song about it. Ring a ring of rosies. Pocket full of posies, a tissue, we all fall down. To drop down as dead. And in many places, it is actually translated as the dead. This word Rephaim, when it shows up, is translated into English as the dead or the shades of the dead ones. And I think that's the point. You see, in these giants, people saw a shade, a ghost, as it were, of all that had died in the flood, all that had led the world to catastrophe. And yet here they were. They were there on the battlements of Hebron, as it were, like creatures that had climbed out of the grave. God had killed them all in the flood, and yet somehow here they were. They lived. The Rapha, the sons of the dead Nephilim. And so it's little wonder that when the 10 spies saw the Anakim, they were horrified. It was early in July, and Israel, led by Moses, had reached the very edge of the wilderness. They were camped at Kadesh, on the southern edge of the promised land, at the bottom of a range of ever-climbing hills that rose like steps away into the misty north, that peaked at the heights of Hebron, that city where the covenant faithful Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah were all rolled together in that tomb in Machpelah, awaiting the kingdom. Hebron was a special place. It was sacred ground for every Israelite, as it is for you and for me. And for them, the promised land was so close now. Their inheritance was just brief hours' march away. The wilderness was behind them, the land before them. Turn back one page to Deuteronomy chapter 1, please, verse 19. And here Moses exhorts the people, and he says, when we departed from Horeb, we went through all that great and terrible wilderness. which ye saw by the way of the mountain of the Amorites, as Yahweh our God commanded us, and we came to Kadesh Barnea. And I said unto you, ye are come unto the mountain of the Amorites, which the Lord our God doth give unto us. Behold, the Lord thy God has set the land before thee. Go up and possess it, as Yahweh God of thy fathers has said unto thee. Fear not, neither be discouraged. Note that little phrase. Fear not. Moses clearly anticipated that they would be afraid. He knew that they would need their courage, their faith. He anticipated that the conquest of the promised land would hold existential threats for them. Look at what he says in verse 28. He says, whither shall we go up? Our brethren have discouraged our hearts, saying, the people is greater and taller than we. The cities are great and walled up to heaven. And moreover, we have seen the sons of the Anakim there. Then I said unto you, dread not, neither be afraid of them. See, this was the sense of the children of Israel when they considered this promised land, a sense of dread. An existential fear, a creeping worry that kept them awake at night. It was the people's idea that they survey the land prior to entering it. That was their idea. Verse 22, you came near unto me, every one of you, and you said, we will send men before us, and they will search us out the land and bring us word again by the way in which we go. It was their idea. God agreed. He said, fine, you send spies. But it was their idea. And on the surface of it, it sounded like a good idea. Let's send some of us. They'll go before us. They'll march through the land, and they'll work everything out before us. Sort of map a bit of a route. They'll work out where the good service stations are, where the good places to stop off for food on the route, where the best and cleanest toilets are, and how to avoid all the toll routes. We'll work that out, and that'll make it easy when we go into the land. It's a great idea, right? Send someone in front of you. But you see, God already knew what the spies were going to see. He knew that. But it was up to them how they reacted. The choice was going to be theirs as to how they responded to what God knew they would see in that land. He knew they were going to see the cast of nightmares, the shades of the long dead sinners guarding the heartland of the promise. He knew they were going to see that. It was up to them how they responded. Well, up the spies went, sticking to the concealment of the craggy heights, fearful of being recognized and hunted. They marched through the night, and then finally getting to the very northern end of the land, to the border of Syria in the north, they then turned south again. And now they were disguised by the route they were taking. They looked like visitors from the non-threatening north. Tourists coming to see the sights, to look at all the best museums down from Syria for a holiday. No, we're nothing like those warlike Israelites from the south. We're from the north. And so they explored the land that God had promised them. And Numbers chapter 13 tells us that there were two events of significance, of note, on their route south. If you'd be so kind as to come back to Numbers chapter 13 with me again. There were two things that really stood out to them on that journey south. Verse 22 of Numbers 13. And they ascended from the south and came, by the south, and came unto Hebron, where Ahiman, Sheshai, and Talmai, the children of Anak, were. So, thing of note number 1. Dear diary, this morning, saw 3 giants. 3 giants on Hebron's battlements. But this event was contrasted with another thing, another event of note during this journey of the spies. Verse 23. And they came unto the brook of Eshcol, and cut down from thence a branch with 1 cluster of grapes, and bare it between 2 upon a staff, and they brought of the pomegranates and figs of the land. They found a cluster of grapes so large that it took 2 of them to carry them from the place where they found them at Eshcol. This would have been a wonderful proof of the fruitfulness of the land. God had said it would be a land flowing with milk and honey, and here they had found a bunch of fruit so large that it would win every prize at the garden competition later that year. A giant cluster of grapes. And yet, the place where they found that cluster of grapes was almost as important as what they found there. Because they found this cluster of grapes at a place called Eshcol. Now, Eshcol means a cluster. That is, a cluster of grapes. So at a place called a cluster of grapes, they found a cluster of grapes. And you're probably thinking, well, so what? Well, this name shows up in the context of the story of the 12 spies and in only one other context in the Bible. Shall we go there? Genesis 14. Here we go. Genesis 14. Here is the only other place this name shows up in the story of the Bible. Genesis 14, verse 13. And it says, and there came one that had escaped and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre the Amorite, and here it is, brother of Eshcol, and brother of Aner. These were confederate with Abram. So Abraham's living at this point at Mamre, that is Hebron, and he's confederate with some Amorites. The word confederate means, and this is a great word, breakers of bread. He broke bread with a group of men, including one called Eshcol. Now, do you know what Abram and Eshcol and the others he broke bread with do in this particular chapter? Well, together with just 318 men from Abram's camp, they tracked down a vast army that has just done a circuit of the Promised Land. And this army, when it had done this circuit of the Promised Land, what they had done in that circuit is invaded and wiped out tribe after tribe of giants. Look at verse 5. Verse 5 says, and in the 14th year came Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him, and they smote, now here's a word we've already encountered, the Rephaim that were in Ashtaroth Karnaim, and the Zuzims, Moses tells us they were giants, in Ham, and the Emims, we read about them, didn't we, in Deuteronomy? They were great and tall like the giants. And the Horites were told elsewhere they were giants unto El Paran, which is by the wilderness. Tribe of giant after tribe of giant fell before this vast invading northern horde. Rephaim and Zuzim and Emims and Horims, and in this chapter, Abraham and Eshcol and his small company destroy this army that was far stronger than 4 tribes of giants. They rescue Lot, and then they lead all of what they had captured to Jerusalem to meet with Melchizedek, the priest like Christ. And just after seeing giants in the very place where Abraham and Eshcol lived together, the spies get proof that the promised land is all that God had promised at a place that just happens to be named after a giant killer. Might take a minute to understand what I've just said there. Isn't that remarkable? They've just seen giants, and they find proof that what God says is reliable and can be trusted at a place named after a man who didn't kill giants. No, he killed people who killed giants. Eshcol, a man who broke bread with Abram. You see, God knew what they would see. But how they responded, that was up to them. Well, the spies returned, and back in Numbers chapter 13 and verse 27, they give their report. And their report goes something like this. Everything that God said, it's true. It's all correct. Everything he said. Numbers chapter 13 and verse 27, they told him and they said, we came to the land whither thou sent us, and yeah, it does. It flows with milk and honey. Look, here's the fruit of it. It took 2 of us to carry this, and our shoulders, they're killing us. Look at that. But, oh, there's always a but, isn't there? But, verse 28, nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land, and the cities are walled and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. Well, that's a bit of a letdown, right? But it's accurate. They're not saying anything that isn't true. The people were strong. The cities were walled. Why? We know now from archaeology that the walls of Lachish, one of the cities they probably visited, were 8 meters thick in places. And yes, there were giants. They've said nothing inaccurate here. Verse 30, Caleb, one of those spies, stands up and he speaks. He stilled the people before Moses and he said, let us go up and possess it at once, for we are well able to overcome it. See, a murmur has gone through the people at the mention of Anak, and you could hear him going, oh, Anak, oh. And Caleb stands up and he stilled the people. He said, we can do this. God is with us. But verse 31, here's how the spies responded to what they saw. Here's how 10 of them responded to what they saw. The other men that went up with Caleb said, "We be not able to go up against this people, for they are stronger than we." You hear the problem with this response? It's not, "Look, Caleb, it's going to be tricky. I hear what you're saying, but I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult than you seem to be indicating here." It's not, "You know what, let's not rush into this. We're going to build a bit of a committee, do a bit of planning, see what we can come up with, make sure everyone's got life jackets." It was simply, "No, we can't. We cannot." And in fact, it's even worse than that. Verse 32, they brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, "The land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eats up the inhabitants thereof, and all the people we saw in it are men of great stature. This," they said, "is a land that swallows people, and everyone in it is huge. Most of the people here are giants with enormous trucks." And in verse 33, they said, "And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which came of the giants, and we were like grasshoppers before them." And can you see the problem in what they're saying? Look at how the sentence runs. At the end of verse 32, "And all the people that we saw." Verse 33, "And there we saw the giants. We were in our own sight as grasshoppers, so we were in their sight." The problem here is their sight. They saw three figures on Hebron's walls. But now everybody looked like a giant to them. Everywhere they were looking, there were giants. And their terrors, they were growing, they were multiplying, and the monsters came crawling out from under the bed. Little wonder that in chapter 14, verse 1, and it says, "And all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night." The whole camp had nightmares, and in every tent they were saying, don't worry, the giants aren't coming tonight, it's okay." Verse 2, "And all the congregation of Israel murmured against Moses and against Aaron, and the whole congregation said unto them, Would God that we had died in the land of Egypt, or would God we had died in this wilderness." Wow, just think of that. Just 3 giants. That's all they've seen. And suddenly death was better. Verse 3, "And wherefore hath Yahweh brought us unto this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our children are going to be a prey. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt?" And they said to one another, "Let us make a captain, let us return to Egypt." And they start looking for a captain. And by verse 10, they are ready to stone Moses and Joshua and Caleb to death. The only thing that saves these 3 men on this occasion is the sudden appearance of something very familiar, and yet somehow far more arresting. A cloudy pillar of fire twisting away above them, up into the heavens, taller than them, taller than the giants, taller than Hebron's walls, twisting up into the sky, a reminder of all that they had forgotten. You see, in their fear and in their terror, they had forgotten the sound of sobbing Egyptians. They had forgotten the walls of Red Sea water, taller than any giant. They had forgotten their victory over Amalek when Moses' hands were held high they surged ahead. They had forgotten water from the rock and bread from the sky. They had forgotten. But Caleb hadn't. Verse 9, only rebel not ye against Yahweh, neither fear ye the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their defense, in the Hebrew, their shade, is departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Fear them not, says Caleb. Bread for us, he says. They're bread for us. Well, what does he mean? Well, what did the wilderness bread do? We're not going to go back there, but you know what happened. It came down in the morning, but if they left it out, it melted in the heat of the sun. This is why they shouldn't have feared. He goes on to say, their shade is taken away. They're in the blazing light of the fire of Yahweh. We stand here under a pillar of fire, and they have no shade. They're going to melt before the heat of Yahweh, and you're worried about a few giants. That's what Caleb meant when he spoke of bread. But you see, for God, this was the final straw, wasn't it? Rather than choosing to remember how God had rescued them from all their fears, they allowed what they saw in their mind's eye to conquer their faith. Only 12 of them had actually seen any giants. Only 12. And there were only 10 talking about them. Most of the nation had seen no giants at all. And yet now they were seeing giants that were taller than God. And so verse 22, because all those men which have seen my glory, they saw the pillar of cloud, they saw the miracles in Egypt, they saw the Red Sea, they've seen all these things which I did in Egypt and which I did in the wilderness, and they've tempted me now these 10 times. They have not listened to the things I've said. Surely they will not see the land which I swear unto their fathers, neither shall any of them that provoked me see it. And so for the next 40 years, their desiccated corpses would fall like autumn leaves from the tree. Their lifespans artificially shortened by God, their aging accelerated until none over 20 on this fateful day in Kadesh survived, save Moses, Caleb, and Joshua. For 40 years they wandered this wilderness, safe, completely safe from giants, but ravaged by God's wrath. Would God that we could have died in this wilderness, they had said. And so they did. And so now that generation passes away. And we move on down through time, and Moses is going to begin to prepare the nation for the conquest of the promised land, a new, more youthful generation. Come across to Numbers chapter 21, please. Numbers 21 and verse 10. It says, and the children of Israel set forth and pitched in Oboth. And they journeyed from Oboth, and they pitched in Ijeabiram, in the wilderness which is before Moab, towards the rising sun. They're going to begin their march now into the promised land, out of the wilderness in which the unfaithful had perished. And they're going to be traveling up the eastern side of the Dead Sea. Verse 21, and Israel sent messages unto Sihon, king of the Amorites, saying, let me pass through thy land. We will not turn into the fields or into the vineyards. We will not drink of the waters of the well. We will go along by the king's highway until we have passed your borders. They want to move up through the land of Sihon without causing any trouble. But Sihon would not suffer Israel to pass through his border. Sihon gathered all his people together, went out against Israel into the wilderness, and he came to Jahaz and fought against Israel, and Israel smote him with the edge of the sword, and possessed his land from Arnon even unto Jabbok, even unto the children of Ammon, for the border of the children of Ammon was strong. So this was their first battle, the first battle for the new generation. And it's one that is forced upon them by Sihon, the Amorite king. It's one of defense, it's not one of attack. It's not by choice. So what was their first deliberate conquest? Well, what was the first battle they chose to have? Well, it's in verse 33. It says, and they turned and they went up by the way of Bashan, and Og, king of Bashan, went out against them, he and all his people, to the battle at Edrei. And Yahweh said unto Moses, fear him not, for I have delivered him into thy hand, all his people, all his land, and you shall do to him as you did to Sihon, king of the Amorites, which dwelt in Heshbon. Here it is. So they smote him and his sons and all his people until there was none left alive, then they possessed his land. This is their first deliberate conquest. It's short, it's sharp, there's almost no detail recorded. And yet hopefully you notice that phrase in this description. Fear him not. Verse 34. Did you spot that? Why would they fear Og? After all, they've just defeated Sihon. Sounds like beating Sihon was pretty non-eventful, pretty straightforward. They defeated him, took his land, easy peasy. Why would they fear Og? Well, come across to Deuteronomy chapter 3, please. Because we've got a parallel record that we can refer to help us get a little bit more detail. And it says in Deuteronomy chapter 3 and verse 1, then we turned and went up the way to Bashan, and Og, king of Bashan, came out against us, he and all his people, to the battle at Edrei. And the Lord said unto me, fear him not, for I will deliver him and all his people and his land into your hand, and you shall do to him as you did to Sihon, king of the Amorites, which dwelt at Heshbon. So Yahweh our God delivered into our hands Og also, the king of Bashan, and all his people. We smote him until nothing was left of him that remained. Pretty much the same, isn't it? But look at verse 11. It says here, for only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of the giants. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Rabath of the children of Ammon? 9 cubits was the length thereof, and 4 cubits the breadth of it, after the breadth of a man. What's going on here? Well, we've got a man here who has a bed that is 9 cubits high. We know he's of the giants. Let's assume for a moment that Og, king of Bashan, was, let's say, 1 cubit less than the length of his bed. You don't actually want your bed to be the same number of cubits as you, because if you do, you get wedged in between head and foot every night. It's not so comfortable. You want your bed slightly longer than you are, don't you? Cold feet otherwise. And so let's assume he wasn't 9 cubits tall, he was 8 cubits tall. How tall's that? Well, in metric, that's about 4 meters. In non-metric, imperial, it's about 13 feet. Now, I didn't put a marker up on the pole to show you, simply because even on a ladder, I couldn't reach it. But you see the line for Goliath. you need to go up about 1 meter higher. So see where the light's in there. Go up a bit higher than those lights. Maybe you can see a small green dot, which was the only piece of tape I could actually get up there, jump on the top of a ladder. That's about 8 feet. Just in case you want someone to scale. This tall, manly figure, there you are. All right, so Og, taller than Goliath, 13 feet tall. Just think about that. Now you might wonder, what was so important about his bed that was worth wondering? Why not just say, and Og was 8 cubits tall? Why say, and Og's bed was 9? I mean, it seems a bit of a roundabout way to describe things, doesn't it? Well, that's not just what it says here. It says his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Now, we're still at this point in time deep within the Bronze Age. To have any iron at all was really something. To have an iron bed at this point in time was a little bit like today if someone said to you, oh yeah, my bed's made of titanium. It's a titanium bed. Well, you know, you'd only have a titanium bed. You'd only spend the enormous amount of money it would cost you to have an iron bed if there was a reason for having an iron bed, if you really, really needed an iron bed. And, well, Og needed it. Because, you see, if you take the standard BMI chart, body mass index chart, and you simply extend it from the height and the weight ratios of a normal man today up to 4 meters, you're going to find that he weighed at least 218 kilograms. But that's assuming that he was built like a basketballer, tall and slim and able to get above the hoops. That's probably not what he was built like. If he was built like a normal man, if he was proportioned the same as a normal man, but taller, if he was properly proportioned, he would have weighed as much as half a ton. 500 kilos of man. That's why he needed an iron bedstead. And add to this one other little thing. You see, it wasn't just Og. Numbers 21 verse 35 tells us that Og had sons. So there were, at the very minimum, at least 3 giants that needed to be fought in this particular battle, one of which probably weighed about 500 kilograms and stood 13 feet tall. And verse 1 here in Deuteronomy chapter 3 tells us that Og left his capital and came to a place called Edrei. His capital was Ashtaroth Karnaim, but he chose to leave there and fight this battle at a place called Edrei. And you might think, well, why did he choose to fight at Edrei? Normally, you choose to fight at your capital city. Your capital city is the one that you most heavily fortify. It's the one that you protect, because that's the one where people are going to come to find you when they want to fight a battle. But no, Og leaves that and he goes to Edrei, another place. Why? Well, he chose to fight at Edrei because, well, Edrei was a massively fortified fortress, but, and get this, it had an entire subterranean fortress built underneath. An underground fortress beneath the city proper. Just think about that for a minute. Moses defeated a 13-foot monster, 2 of his sons, all of his army, and in all likelihood, the battle was conducted in an underground fortress in which your enemy knows every twist, every turn, every pitfall, and every laid trap, and you're completely blind because he's turned the lights off. If that's not the stuff of nightmares, I don't know what is. Just think about that. And the record says, verse 3, so Yahweh our God delivered into our hands Og also, the king of Bashan, and all his people, and we smote him, and there was nothing left that remained to him. That's it. You see, fighting giants is all about fear. Giants are only scary because we make them huge in our minds. And in the dark, we imagine them bigger and bigger than they are in real life. That's what giants are. They are the things that we make big and scary in our minds, the things that grow more and more threatening the more we think about them. And we started last class by saying that these things, the night wolves and the like, they faded and shrunk under the scrutiny of our adult eyes, and we put them away. But we know, don't we, that giants are real. And I know most of us have got giants we're fighting. There are terrifying figures that loom large in our minds, and they grow bigger in the dark, don't they? And you lie in bed and you can see those giants. Most of us have got fears and doubts and anxieties and worries that prey on us, and we feel as though we are grasshoppers before these problems. I have them. I have personality flaws I don't know how to fix. I have a broken friendship that I don't know how to mend. I have doubts and fears at times, even about God. And I have worries about the ecclesia and my place within it. And Moses, you think about Moses, here's a man, yes, his vigor was not dimmed, but he's 120 years old. He's a senior citizen with all the worries and stresses of senior citizens. Worrying, well, maybe not worrying, but we worry about things like financial security and the love of our family, our connection and our relevance within our ecclesia. Whether we mean as much as we used to, whether we can still do what we need to do, whether we're going to be able to hold things together as we age. Giants that loom large in the dark. We're no different to Israel, are we? We face giants, and it's up to us how we respond. Franklin D. Roosevelt, the President of the United States who faced the Great Depression and Hitler's First Reich, said this: "We've got nothing to fear but fear itself." He wasn't completely right, but he was close. In fighting giants, the problem isn't really the giant. Giants died like anyone else. Moses, an old man, proved that, and David and his rock did too. The battle was over like that. Yahweh our God delivered into our hands Og also, the king of Bashan, all his people who smote him. The problem is that giants make us afraid, and fear itself is the giant. And God had an answer to that. I want to show you that answer as we finish. Deuteronomy 31, verse 7 and 8. This is the last passage we'll turn up. Deuteronomy 31, verse 7 and 8. Moses called unto Joshua, and he said unto him in the sight of all Israel, "Be strong, be of a good courage, for thou must go with this people into the land which Yahweh has sworn unto their fathers to give them. Thou shalt cause them to inherit. And Yahweh, he it is that doth go before thee. He will be with thee. He will not fail thee, neither forsake thee. Fear not. Do not be dismayed." Verse 12. "Gather the people together, men and women and children, and the stranger which is within thy gates, that they may hear and that they may learn. And fear Yahweh your God. Don't be afraid, he says. Fear not. Be afraid. You see, does that seem strange to you? Don't be afraid. I want you to be afraid. Gather everyone and be afraid. What he's saying is, don't fear them. Don't worry about the giants. Fear me. You think, that seems like a contradiction. But you see, it was something that Moses understood. There they were on the mount. They saw the thunderings and the lightnings and the noise of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. The people saw it. They removed. They fled away far off. They said to Moses, you speak to him. We don't want to speak to him. We'll listen to what you say, but don't let God speak to us. He might kill us with his words. So Moses came unto the people and said, fear not, for God has come to prove you that his fear might be before your faces, that you sin not. Moses understood that if we recall who God is, and if we bring to mind all the amazing things that he has done to save you and to save me, our personal Red Sea moment, that moment for you where you got victory at the battle in Rephidim, that moment when God gave you manna in the wilderness, Moses knew that if we remember those things, the giants of fear, we'll be able to overcome them if we can remember the fearful things that God has done on our behalf. And so we'll finish our study this morning with these words. The fear of Yahweh is the start of wisdom. And if we travel on that journey, that fear will be translated, because in the end, there's no fear in love. If we love our God perfectly, that fear will become something else altogether as our Lord defeats our giants for us.